Hello and welcome to an exclusive hour-long programme with me, Alex Belfield, talking to a man I've been trying to talk to for years. What's wrong with me? Richard Madeley.
You smell.
It's offensively. You put in all these requests and you ask and no, he doesn't want to talk to you. There's somebody more important.
No. Listen, we never... It's a kind of a syndrome, this. You go to a party, say, like a showbiz party, and somebody that you really like, and you're a fan of or whatever, comes up to you with a little lost expression on the face, and they say, why didn't you want me on your show? And we said, what do you mean? He said, well, my agent put me forward for it, and apparently you don't like me. And people take our name in vain. They say, no, Richard and Judy don't want to talk to it. No, they've got no time for them. It's just not. No, hello. Just
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Good to see you.
It's really good to see you. You've got this brand new book called Fathers and Sons, and what a read it is. It got me thinking, and I like a book like that makes you consider your own life. Why did you write it?
Basically, I was having a pizza in Pizza Hut in Kennington with my literary agent, who'd acted for us when we wrote our autobiography about 7 years ago. And he's been very kind. And it was about the third meeting of the kind I'd had with him. And he said, look, Richard, I think you can write. I've seen your chapters in that book. We need to talk about writing a book. And he came up with 3 more ideas, and I'd hated all of them. So to entertain him, I started telling him about my background story, my grandfather and stuff. And after about 3 minutes, I can still see his face. Classic agent's face, the eyes sort of focused. And he dropped his knife and fork and he went, that's the book. And that was it. And I'm a journalist, and I couldn't believe that I realised in this flash that I'd been sitting on a really good story. I didn't realise it was the kind of story that you could tell in a book. But it kind of crystallised in that moment, so I left my pizza Napolitan, headed for my laptop.
And you've still got your mother with us. Your father's now passed away.
Oh, a long time ago.
There's a lot of people involved when you write a book like this. Did you consider how they'd react to it?
Yes, I did. But because it's a very truthful book, the truth never hurts. That's my feeling. And I don't think I'm betraying anybody or being cruel about anybody. I'm certainly critical of one person in the book, but he's been dead for, probably 90 years. The only bit of the book that caused me issues in writing it, and I did discuss it with my mother, was the bit you alluded to in the introduction, when I had about a 2-year period of my father beating me quite severely with a stick, or a number of sticks. Had he been alive, I wouldn't have written the book, because I would have had to include that. And that period of my life was something he was very ashamed of, and had reconciled to himself, but knew that I forgave him. So I think to write about it while he was alive or freshly dead, I think would have been a bit insensitive. But he's been dead since 1977, and I think it's okay.
How does your mum feel knowing that she was around whilst this was going on? Did it make her question how good she was as a mother? Because reading this book, it makes you wonder how she was not aware that this was going on.
I had a fantastic childhood. I loved my father very much, despite what happened. And he never hit me. And then when I was about 8, I did something on a Saturday, which was the day that my mother went to the shops. It was her sort of day off. She went out with a friend and had a coffee, at the department store, and sort of gossiped and browsed. And on this particular Saturday, I did something to annoy my dad. And he told me to turn around and face the wall in the living room. And he left the room. And he'd never hit me, so I had no reason to think he was going to. And I heard the shed door open in the garden, and you could always hear it open because it scraped on the concrete path. From that point, it used to produce a very strange sensation inside me, a watery feeling in the belly, a dryness of the mouth, because Dad had gone to get a stick, the sticks that he used to put his runner beans on, big bamboo cane. And he came back into the room, and I still couldn't see he'd got one. I had no suspicion he'd gone to get a stick. I had no idea what he was doing. And I'm still looking at the painting, starting to count, to save time. And suddenly, it just felt as if my legs had caught fire, my calves. And I heard a kind of a cracking sound, which I thought was fire. I really thought for a split second that I'd caught fire. And the pain was immense. And then the same sensation on my buttocks. And I was paralysed with pain for a couple of seconds, as one is. And then managed to sort of turn round and saw the face of my lovely father, who I adored, just contorted with rage. I'd never seen him look like that before. And he was wielding this long bamboo cane. I was astonished. And it was coming in towards me horizontally, hard. And it was aiming for my shoulder blades. Because I turned it caught me on my upper arm, on the muscle. It was absolutely agonising. And I sort of fell to my knees. And he stopped then and said something gruff like, and don't do it again, and walked out of the room. And in a strange kind of surreal moment, I thought my mother must have come home early, because I could hear the kettle singing in the kitchen. I could hear the whistle of the kettle. And then I realised it wasn't at all, it was me. It was the noise I was making, this kind of animalistic cry of pain. As you say, it came to an end when it happened one evening, and it probably happened about 20 times over the 2 years. Anyway, this particular day, Mum had bought a packet of rollers, and we weren't an affluent family at all, and they were to be shared around after dinner, or tea. And I asked for one before tea, and my mother said, yeah, just one. So, like being a kid, I took him in. I'm watching Valerie Singleton on Blue Peter. And after 5, I looked down and I'd eaten the lot. Well, actually, there's one left. My dad just went nuts, and his face went dark again. But this time, Mum was there. And he sent me upstairs, and he went out to get the stick. And it was the severest beating I ever had from him. And my mother heard it, and she would have come up, I think, had she known how severe it was. But she heard what was happening. And Dad went downstairs, and then there was I remember hearing a colossal argument. And then my mother came upstairs and told me to take my shirt off, and I was horrified because he really had gone too far, and I had a lot of wheels. And the next morning I came down to breakfast, and she said to me, now look, I have spoken to your father, and he's going to apologise to you for what has been going on. He's going to promise you that he's never going to do it again, because if he does, he knows what's going to happen. I was offered the most contrite, sincere, fulsome apology I've ever been offered in my entire life, and I'm now 52. He then went on to sort of, in his own 1960s buttoned-up way, try and explain to his son of 10 what had been going on.
It almost seems as if you feel it was okay for him to do it.
Not at all, no. I mean, it wasn't okay for him to do it. But there's a phrase I use in the book, it's a well-known phrase, that to understand all is to forgive all. I was able to remember that there'd been a long period of my childhood where this hadn't happened, so it wasn't as if it had gone stretched back as far as I could remember. It was a strange aberration. And the explanation he's tried to give, which actually the research for the book fully endorsed, actually, was that he had a lot of anger in him because his father had been immensely cold towards him when he'd been growing up on the farm in Shropshire. Very cold. Had never told him he loved him, never gave him a cuddle, never gave him a kiss, only once in his entire life put his arm around him, virtually because my father forced him to. And until the day he died, actually, that is, my father died because he predeceased my grandfather. As I say, he never told him he loved him. And there was a lot of buried rage, and it had come out at my expense. I think the poison began to flow in 1907. My grandfather, who was called Geoffrey, was 10, and he was part of a big family. And his father ran a shop in Worcester. And the shop went bust in 1907, and there were no sort of social services or benefits or anything like that. And the whole family, this lovely, comfortable middle-class family, was about to be turfed out into the street, literally, with nowhere to go. So Henry, in despair, went up to Shropshire and to a farm just outside Shawbury, and basically, cap in hand, asked his older brothers who ran the farm for help. And the oldest brother, who controlled the purse strings, a guy called William, tell you what, we'll offer you all the fares for the whole family to go to Canada. I will give you some stake money as well. You don't have to pay this back. All I ask is that we have Geoffrey here on the farm. You leave your 10-year-old behind. And Henry said, well, why? He said, well, because, soon he'll be strong enough to work, and we'll look after him. And that's the deal. You can take it or leave it. And Henry, with his back against the wall, took it. And went back down to Worcester, and it's almost like The Simpsons. The Madeleys are going to Canada. And everybody got very excited, and a couple of weeks later, or whatever, they moved up towards Liverpool to take the boat to take them across to Montreal and Quebec. And they stopped at the farm on the way. They all bedded down for the night, and they were told that they were going to be making a pre-dawn start so they could get to Liverpool on time to catch the ship. And my granddad woke up after the sun had risen, and the bed that he'd shared his brothers with was empty and cold, and he sat up, and everybody's bags, which had been at the foot of the bed the night before, his brothers and sisters, gone. The floor was empty except for his bags. And he ran down the stairs, and there in the kitchen was his Uncle William, who basically told him his fortune. I mean, didn't dress it up. They've gone without you, your father's agreed, and you're staying here with us, and we'll send you to school in the village, and you're going to live here, and you can help out on the farm, and when you're 21, 11 years' time, if you want, you can go to Canada. And that was it. I mean, he had absolutely no say or choice in the matter. He was so shocked he didn't speak for a day, and he tried to run away that night. He thought he could walk to Liverpool from Shropshire, but they'd locked him in, so he couldn't get out. And his new life began, a totally different life than the one he'd been used to in a bustling suburban town, and a life without his mother, his father, or his beloved brothers and sisters. I mean, it was just the most shocking thing to happen to a little boy.
What do you think had gone on emotionally with your father that made him snap for those 2 years? Because it hadn't happened before, and it didn't happen again.
When I was researching this book, I was researching a story that mostly I knew. It's all part of our sort of family history and legend, but I did discover a couple of extraordinary details, and I must just tell you this because it's fascinating. 10 years after they'd left him, and he'd never seen them since, the Great War was well underway, and Grandad enlisted. And he was 20 years old, and he was on a troop train going down to the coast to go to France and fight in the trenches. And it stopped at Crewe Station to read coal and water. And another troop train, packed with soldiers, pulled up alongside. And he looked at them and he could see they looked a bit different from his division, and they were Canadians. And he'd had a letter about a month before from his mum in Ontario saying that his two older brothers had also enlisted and were probably coming overseas to fight. And he just had this animal dart of instinct there on the train. So he went up to the officer's compartment and said, permission to check, and they laughed at him and said that the chances are nil, but OK, you've got 5 minutes before we pull out. And he crossed over, got onto the train, and I often think this was like that moment in Saving Private Ryan, where, Tom Hanks is sort of, has anyone seen Orion? And they go, guys, have you seen Orion in this division? All that stuff. He gets on the train in real life and is going down through these grumpy Canadian soldiers, headed for the most efficient killing fields the world had ever known, saying, has anyone heard of a Madeley? Is there a Madeley in this unit? Does anyone know Madeley? And he got to them about the central carriage with very little time left, and there they were, both of them, sitting on a seat looking out of the window, smoking pipes. And it was an electrifying moment, because they hadn't seen him since the night they crept away from him in Shawbury all those years before. He hadn't seen them since they were young teenagers, and they were all of them in uniform. And, of course, his brothers were talking in Canadian accents, American accents. He was still speaking in his Shropshire burr. And they had 5 minutes to catch up, but he never saw his older brother again. He was killed about 2 weeks later at Vimy Ridge, which effectively made my grandfather withdraw completely inside himself. That made my father, as he grew up, very angry, because he felt rejected by his father. He felt unloved by his father. He couldn't understand what was wrong with him, Christopher. Why didn't Geoffrey love him? And I think in the end, rejection breeds anger. He dealt with it. He turned it round when I was born, when my sister was born. He was a loving, very consciously loving, demonstrative father, but he couldn't quite expel that anger, and that's what came out between the ages of 8 and 10 for me.
What I'm still struggling to understand, though, is how you forgive so easily, because I'm a believer, and if something happens to you, that doesn't give you the right to pass it on. So that was a weakness on your father's part, at the very least.
Undoubtedly. But it wasn't a total weakness. That's what I'm trying to sort of explain. And he screwed up big time for 2 years of my childhood. I rarely believe that bad things that happen to children, or indeed adults, quote, ruin their life. There are always ways out of the pit. And on the whole, my father climbed out of the pit of his cold, unloving childhood. But he did slip up, but then he wasn't perfect. And, we just have to forgive each other. I mean, what's the alternative? That I condemn my father to hell because he behaved badly, intermittently for 2 years, or I try and understand.
But you're rationalising this as if a 10-year-old is as sentient as you are sat here now. It's a different thing when it's a child, because he's the adult and you're the child.
Yes. All right, then I'll put it another way. I trusted my instincts as a child, and as an adult, having reviewed them thoroughly in this, 70,000, 80,000 word book, I was right to. I've come to that judgment. Now others may disagree and may read the book and think, he's naive or he's kidding himself. I hope they don't, because I think I have worked it out. And also, as I said to you earlier, it's a pattern. I mean, ultimately, when my grandfather got to Canada to be reunited with his family, happily, he could have gone there and berated them. He could have grabbed Henry and punched him and said, what were you doing? What were you thinking? But he thought it through, and he decided it was in his gift to forgive, and he did forgive, and the reconciliation was instant. I mean, I think his parents were mightily relieved that he came as a, if you like, the reverse of a prodigal son, because they were the prodigal parents, having abandoned him. My father ultimately forgave his father for the coldness, and they ended up communicating through classical music. They used to listen to classical music together. That was their language, and they'd listen to a great passage, a great movement, and then when it was over, they'd open their eyes and look at each other and smile. And I realised, watching them as a teenager, they'd just spoken to each other. Here's the proof that it works. I asked Jack to read the book, my son, and write the epitaph. He's 21. He wrote it just after he'd done his finals. And I said, and you must write exactly what you think, and you must write what you think about me. Don't spare me. We've had our moments. Write what you like. It made me cry. He said that Geoffrey had forgiven Henry. Christopher, my father, had forgiven Geoffrey. Richard had forgiven Christopher. And Jack said the only difference in this story is that I've got nothing to forgive. Which it was lovely. It was the best present he's ever given me. And I phoned him up and I said, look, you don't have to write that, I said, there must be things that, you feel sore about your upbringing. He said, no, Dad, I don't. He said, I really mean it. I want that to stay. So it stayed in. And here we are. I'm a happy father with a happy son and 2 happy stepsons. I'm just here to tell you, forgiveness works. I was never remotely sexually assaulted by him, and I was never permanently injured and never broke anything or had any serious cuts.
It's still abuse, isn't
it? Of course it's
abuse. And it would be classed today as serious abuse.
No, of course it is. I'm just putting it on the scale. Everything is on a scale. He would be very, very tender and very often apologetic, but not in the same way as he was after the last time. So I think it was an emotional spasm. He should have done something about it, probably today, because we live in a much better regulated world in terms of abuse on children. He might have been stopped by the law, but in the end, he he and my mother stopped it, and he kept to his promise.
Had your mother not been there on that final thrashing, maybe it wouldn't have been the final thrashing.
That's possible, but actually because he went much further on that occasion, he hit me more often and he hit me harder, and the marks were much more apparent. I think actually if my mother hadn't been there, it would have gone the worse for him, because I would have gone to school, gone to PE, and there would have been questions.
All right. I think it's incredibly magnanimous, and I don't mean that facetiously or sarcastically. I think the way you've dealt with this, and for a 10-year-old to be so rational, is bizarre. You've always got something going on. You and Judy always are in the papers. You've either said something, done something, gone somewhere. Just very recently you moved to a new TV station. It's a completely new adventure. Are you insane? Do you like the challenge of something that might not work turning it into something that will or could?
You've got it in the last part of that sentence, and we're both like that. And I know we don't look like risk takers. I know we look like a cosy sort of, middle-class, middle-aged couple, but we've always taken calculated risks with our career because it makes it fun. And anyway, what's to lose? I mean, if a move to a new channel or something, or a new program doesn't work, well, you're not going to die. You can always do something else. But you're right. I mean, we were both news reporters, news presenters back in 1988. We were both journalists by training, and we were asked to do this daytime show called This Morning. Now, at that time, there was no proper daytime television existing in Britain, so it was a risk because there was no guarantee that people would start watching it. In fact, surveys showed that most people wouldn't watch because they'd feel guilty at switching on the television during the day. They'd just been converted to breakfast television, but, mid-morning, forget it. It's wrong. We just had an instinct. We knew it worked in America. Most things that work there ultimately work here. So we took a punt on it. And all our... we weren't known then, so it wasn't the press that said this, but all our colleagues said, "You're mad, leaving the newsroom, and this is what you guys do. You're crazy. It's not going to work. No one's going to watch. You'll be out of a job in 3 months." We said, well, we're going to go. And we made it work. And then 13 years later, we felt we'd taken that as far as we could, so we said, we said privately we were leaving, and Channel 4 zoomed in with this proposal that we do a 5 p.m. Talk show. And they said the reason for it was that politically, within television, that 5 to 6 o'clock slot was about to become very important because you deliver a big audience into peak time. And no one had really thought about that before, but Channel 4 got it. And they discussed it with us, and we thought, they're right. And we'd always wanted to do a kind of a tea time magazine. It was a bit early, but hey, we'll give it a go. So we left, and you know what the papers said. I mean, there were pictures of us with an axe hanging over our head, But the ratings were dissected because they weren't good at first. They never are with a new project, unless it's a repeat of a big show. And for 3 months, it was like trying to build an aircraft as it trundled down the runway on takeoff. It was very hard work. But we got it in the air, and we got it right, and we got the format right. And I would say within 6 months, it was a going concern with good ratings. And within a year, the so-called graveyard 5 o'clock slot, which we were told we were mad to go to, had become the, quote, hotly contested 5 o'clock slot. And we had all the ratings battles, culminating with the one with Paul O'Grady, where we traded punches at 5 o'clock. And the papers traded punches on our behalf, inventing a war that didn't exist because Paul's a mate. Anyway, we did that for 7 years, and last year we told Channel 4 that we thought we'd taken that as far as we could. We don't, two things: you can get bored doing the same thing, however exciting it is to begin with, and secondly, you've got to refresh. And we're both quite creative, and you've got to move on and try new things while you're young enough to. And this is maybe our last sort of big move. So we told them we were leaving, and that got out, and various media outlets contacted us, and offers came and went, and this thing came from UK TV. And the thing about television at the moment is, everybody knows this who's in television, terrestrial figures are dropping and digital ratings are rising. It's a piece of history in television unfolding in front of us. And the digital platforms, as they call them, in other words, I mean the television programmes you get on Digital and Sky, are getting healthier and healthier. And there's a channel called Dave, which was a rebrand that launched about 18 months ago, which is doing really well. It's getting about 3 million adult viewers a week. Now, that's good for digital, and it's a sign of the future. And we always like to get ahead of the curve, and we thought, OK, apart from anything else, everybody who has a television set in Britain will have to watch via digital within about 2 years. Most people do now because all the analogue transmitters are being switched off. Now's the time. So we said yes. There were personal reasons too. It's a As for Live pre-recorded show. We do 2 on a Tuesday and 2 on a Wednesday to go out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Monday's a compilation show. So that freed us some time up, which meant we either worked less hard, or I could write another book, or Judy could do something else. It was a no-brainer. So we said yes to a cacophony of criticism again. What are you doing? You're crazy. Your careers are over. Yeah, actually, you didn't walk away from Channel 4. You got the push, didn't you? And you're going to digital television because no one else will have you, which is cobblers. We turned down lots of offers from other companies and channels. But this just seemed... It's risky. And it means we can build something brand new. I mean, Watch is the channel. If anyone's got Sky, it's on the first page of the electronic programme guide. It's there towards the bottom, but it's on the first page, which is great. Our show is called Rich and Judy's New Position, which goes out at 8 o'clock. That's the first showing, and 9 in the next morning, and that's the second, 5 o'clock in the evening, our old Channel 4 slot, as I say. And, I mean, if people think that we didn't realise when we agreed to do this that initially, at least, we were going to get considerably smaller figures than we were getting on Channel 4, which was an established brand, obviously, that's a no-brainer. But we like building things. We built this morning, we built the 5 o'clock slot, and we're confident that we can build the digital slot. And if we don't, we'd be disappointed, but I don't think we've got much to prove anymore. I mean, we are what we are, and, you know, we've had 2 big successes, and I'd like to think this will work, and people will come to us, and they'll enjoy us at 8 o'clock in the evening. And if they don't, good, that's consumer choice, and we'll see where we go from there.
And this might be a bit of a pseudo-technical question, but is it more difficult you getting the guests that you had previously? Because let's be frank, if there's me on the list, if there's you on the list, and if there's Loose Women on the list, you're going to get it first, Loose Women will go second, and I'll be last in the queue. That's just the way it works. How does it work now with you being at Watch?
So far, I mean, I can only tell you what we've had over the last week and what's coming up. I mean, so far we've had Helen Mirren. We've had Samuel L. Jackson, you know, a major player. We've had Josh Hartnett, one of the biggest Hollywood names. We've had big British domestic names like Alan Davis, you know, who's come on. We've had Eddie Izzard. We seem to be getting them, I think, A, because they're around and it's that time of year, but because Judy and I have built up a reputation, if you like, and we know a lot of these people. I mean, all those people I've mentioned we've interviewed before, and they enjoyed the experience. So when their agents say, well, look, these are the people that want you to come on, you know, Loose Women, This Morning, I was going to say Parkinson, Jonathan Ross, Richard and Judy, there is thankfully a considerable contingent who say, I don't care if the ratings are small, I'd like to be part of that show. Give you an example. We were once invited to go on either Parkinson or on the same night it was going to be Chris Evans. Now, you'd think we'd go for Parky, and I loved Parky, and we thought, well, we can do Parky another time, because he was going... In fact, we were never asked again. But Chris, on TFI, was a hot shot around, and it had only been going for about a month, and his ratings were about 500,000. They rose to 2 million in the end, and our agent said, don't go on TFI. I mean, and we said, no, it's a hot show. It's a really good show, and it'll be fun. So we went on Chris's. Also, we knew him. He was a bit of a mate. So that's in play. So in terms of getting good guests, yes, it is harder. It's harder to persuade agents until the figures start to rise. But a lot of people see it as a long-term investment, and they've come on. So far, I'm delighted with the calibre.
A question I really want to ask you, and I don't mean this in any facetious way, but is it still 50-50 in terms of your career ambitions?
Well, what you have to understand about Judy is, and all her friends who know her personally and intimately will laugh when they see headlines that say, quote, Judy, I'm only in television because Richard wants me to be, or, you know, words to that effect. It's utter cobblers. Judy's a feminist. She's an extremely strong-minded woman. Our marriage is a relationship of equals. It really is. And we don't go, say, to a holiday destination that we both of us don't equally want to go to. I don't kind of drag her through her career by her hair like some caveman, you know, dragging her to the fire, to the brightness of the flame. She does exactly what she wants to do. For example, some of the ideas that we were approached with before we agreed to UK TV, one of them was for me to go down to France and run a vineyard as a reality show for ITV1, and it was going to be a 1-hour programme every week, over a year, kind of a year in Provence for me, to run a vineyard and see if I could produce a decent vintage of wine at the end of it. Now, who would say no to that? I was pretty tempted. Judy said, no, that means we won't see the kids very often. The answer is no. And she was right. We both have to want to do things. We both have to, otherwise, and they're not going to work. If Judy wasn't keen, and this is hard work, this new series, if Judy wasn't keen on doing it, she'd be miserable. That would show. We'd have arguments. The marriage would come under enormous strain. So we always say we both have to want to do something or not want to do something. It's not good enough for just one of us. I think because Judy is less obviously ambitious than I certainly have been in the past, people assume that she's just sort of marking time until I run out of steam, you know. But it's not true. It really isn't. And as I say, if you knew her well, as our friends did, that they titter, you know, when they read that. You can't tell Judy, you know, what time to get out of bed. She does it. She does everything that she decides is right for her and right for us. And equally, People say, how do you work together without driving each other mad? Well, the answer is because we don't drive each other mad. We couldn't possibly work under the kind of pressure we have done for the last 20 years if we didn't enjoy it, if we didn't enjoy each other's company in the car going to work, in the meetings at work, in the studio and in the car going home. We enjoy it. We find it stimulating. We're the kind of married couple that does like to spend a lot of time together. We stimulate each other in every way, and that's why we've done it for so long. That's why This Morning lasted with us for 13 years. If I'd been paired with another presenter, who I might have liked a lot, I don't think I would have stayed for more than 3. It would have been too much. But because we're married, it makes it easier in a way. It normalises it.
What I really like about you as well, you're only as good as your guest, and you love someone with a story that you can get into and get those questions in, and because you are Richard Madeley, you can ask them. That's a great place to be, because you can take far more privileges than I can, because I'm not known. It gives you a special way in, doesn't it?
That's very true, and I think that applies for anyone who's been in the public eye on a network sort of show and with a recognisable sort of identity for a while. It has pitfalls because it can be misunderstood, sometimes I think maliciously misunderstood from the outside by aspects of the media. I'll give you a classic example of this. I'm much derided. I'm not being defensive, but it's a good example of what I mean. I'm much derided for, during our interview with Bill Clinton, asking him a question which had a connection with the fact that back in 1990 I was accused wrongly of shoplifting. I went through a year of the legal process, elected for trial at Crown Court, and was duly acquitted. During the interview, we got to the point where he was discussing Monica Lewinsky, and we were kind of holding him to account for the fact that he had lied through his teeth, for a year, to his wife, to his daughter, to the American people, and to his legal advisors. And Judy mentioned that, and it just sparked a thought in my head, and I said, and what I actually said, pretty much word for word, was this. I said, could I just talk about your legal team, Mr. Clinton? I said, the thing is, I'm not making any comparisons here, but it just sparks a thought. A long time ago, I was accused of theft, of a criminal offence. And I spent about a year, similar to the period you went through on this, proclaiming my innocence, which was genuine. I said, and one of the groups of people that I had to look straight in the eye and talk to about it as we planned our defence strategy was my lawyers, my QC, his lawyer, his clerk. I said, and I just cannot conceive, I said, of sitting eye to eye with them over a table and lying to them about my innocence. If I'd been guilty, I would have had to plead it. I just can't imagine doing that. How did you look your high-powered legal team in the eye and lie about this? And I don't remember the answer. Very shortly after that was Richard compares his shoplifting ordeal, in quotes, although it was actually a bit of an ordeal, to being President of the United States. I didn't. It was I'm sorry, it was an intelligent question. So if you do use yourself in the equation, as I did there, you can he got a good response in the interview, but you can come unstuck by people who want to, destabilise you a bit.
That's what feeds your publicity in one way. Without you making those kind of comments or asking those type of questions,
that's
that
true.
all stops. So it's all part of the game, really, isn't it?
And it's part of the you're quite right, and it's part of the danger. And I mean, I've said in other interviews that, people talk about gaffes and stuff like that. I do let myself off the leash consciously. I mean, I don't recklessly, sort of run around the interview area and sort of, kicking balls into touch. But no, I do consciously allow myself to be as natural and as risky as possible, because it makes for more entertaining television, and it tends to get better answers. If you ask sort of tight sphinctered questions and boxed off way, you tend to get that kind of reply. But if you ask loose questions, hopefully with a hidden core, you tend to have more of a conversation than an interview.
I'm just going to make a note. Tight sphinctered questions. I'll make a note of those for next time I do an interview. And thinking about when you do these interviews, I don't blame you for not doing many. David Letterman in America says, I do an hour a day live. That's my interview.
Yeah, exactly right.
And really, it's not in your benefit to sit talking to people like me day in, day out, because actually you're on enough anyway, aren't you?
Yes, I agree with that. And sometimes when we are sort of perhaps unpleasantly maligned somewhere or other, we can actually use our programme to set the record straight. Not that we do that very much, because it sounds like whinging. And as I've thought for a very long time, you've got to be really careful. I mean, this has been a very serious interview in the most part. And I'm not particularly a serious person, and I don't take myself that seriously. In fact, I try not to take myself seriously at all, because if you're in the public eye and you're recognisable, you just look silly and pompous, and anyway, you'll suffer if you do. If you take yourself seriously, you're going to suffer, because you are going to get it ripped out of you. That's part of I always call it the hidden clause 2 in any contract you sign. It says they will rip it out of you. So you have to not mind that, and you have to get yourself in a sort of a zen-like position where you smile at yourself. That's why I don't bother correcting all this stuff about the gaffes and things. I mean, things like, I've seen it on the website, Richard to author. So this autobiography, who wrote it? Ricky, honestly, it's there. I mean, one of the journalists put this to me, and as if, and Richard to Painter. So it's a self-portrait. Who did it? Can you imagine me asking that?
But going back to your first one, actually, it's a good question to ask, because half the people we talk to today don't write their books. So actually, it was a legitimate question. Having read your autobiography the first time with the Richard and Judy book, which you didn't talk to me about,
sorry,
still not forgiving you for that.
Okay.
There's a rumour in this business that you're difficult to work for, you and Judy, and that you fire a lot of people and people come and go. And you know what it made me think of was Shirley Bassey. People say she's a diva. And what I would say to people, well, yes, you would be. If your name's on the tin and it looks rubbish or it sounds rubbish or it is rubbish, the producer isn't going to be the one that's going to get laughed at. It's going to be you. So I don't blame you in that way as well for protecting your product, because that's all you've got, isn't it?
Yes, it's true. I mean, look at the You Say We Pay thing. I mean, that was a. It's funny. The things that go badly wrong are always the things that come completely out of a left field. That you don't expect to happen. And I said at the time, actually, when that story broke, I said, look, this is going to be cock-up, not conspiracy, and it's going to be a long way back down the line, because I knew that our production department weren't sloppy in that way, and it turned out to be the service provider. Who were in another office in another part of town. And I knew that would be the case, but the story was Richard and Judy in quiz scandal, and we were actually the weekend that story broke, to our horror, we were staying in a hotel, and we went down to breakfast, and everyone's reading the paper with these headlines and our pictures, and morning, we sit down. But you're right, our name's on the tin, we had to take the flak. But I don't think we're difficult to work with. Most of the team, for example, who was on the last edition of our Channel 4 programme, are still with us for the new one, and we get on with them. We're very fond of them. They're a lot younger than us, most of them, and we're quite sort of paternal and maternal towards them. I don't think we're difficult to work with, but we don't suffer fools gladly, because there's no time. I don't mind people who make mistakes. I don't mind people sort of learning on the job, because I do. Everybody does. What I can't stand is people who lie, who cock things up and pretend it was somebody else, blame a junior researcher. I hate that. I believe absolutely in frankness and openness. And, if you ask somebody a question about, say, details of an item we're going to do, and they don't know because they've not done the research, and so they start to sort of make it up a bit, it happens from time to time, they'll get short shrift, because, we can't go on air with a duff brief. But that's just being professional. But on a personal level, I count most of the people I've worked with, say, just to take a period of the last 10 years, as personal friends, I go to their weddings, christenings, meet them for drinks on holiday. I don't think we're difficult to work with, but we're demanding, definitely. I think we need to be.
And you mentioned the phone scandal thing. How do you feel when your name is used as the scapegoat for that? Like you say, you weren't answering the phones. You didn't put the caller through. You didn't know anything about it. There must be a side of just saying, give us a break, but you can't, because it's your programme. Again, it's that name on the tin thing, isn't it?
Well, the only thing we could do through our media spokesman and on one day through a lawyer — I hate getting lawyers involved, it's much better to get these things resolved in a friendly way with the newspaper involved — was to insist that they put into any coverage of the article, whatever the headline, at some point in the piece, there is no suggestion that Richard and Judy were personally involved in this. Now, I think that's only fair. So long as that was in the article, it could be not salacious, it could be as sensational as they liked. So long as that was there and that was clear to like, for example, Ant and Dec, and their one, it was always put. Ant and Dec are in no way to suggest involved personally in this, and that was good enough for me. It was unpleasant. I think the day it was the Mail on Sunday. I think the Mail on Sunday did a really good job. It was they were the ones who uncovered the You Say We Pay problem, and they ran with it. And I think that they did us all a favour. As did the subsequent newspapers who did their other investigations into other programmes and channels. Television had definitely got cocky. It had, as an industry, it had begun to take, at a corporate level, I don't mean in terms of people like me and Judy or Ant and Dec, but at a corporate level, it had definitely begun to take its audience for granted, and without doubt, treat them with a degree of contempt. Now, all that was hidden, all that was going on under the surface in board meetings that people like us never go to, but it damn well came out, and it gave everyone the fright of their lives, and there were some sackings, and those who'd operated on that basis of contempt had to wise up fast. So I I often complain about the way we're treated by the press, but the You Say We Pay scandal, which was the the gateway to everything else that flowed in the next 18 months, was a good thing in the end, and a good thing for our industry. So, oddly, perversely enough, I don't regret it.
And the one thing that's very, very important for you and your programme is integrity. Your audience trusts you, they rely on you, they come to you for news when it breaks, they come to you for the proper questions that need to be asked. If you lose that, you haven't got an act anymore,
Absolutely right, absolutely right. To go back, that's why we insisted that accurate and true phrase was put into those reports. Integrity, and people... part of our... I mean, Judy and I don't do an act, we're not a comedian who it turns out has a sleazy secret, which, people might be forgiving about. We are what you see. And if it turned out that we weren't, and that we were crooks, or liars, or the marriage wasn't real, or in some way we're presenting on a regular basis some kind of facet of our personalities and characters to the viewers who like us and who follow us, it would all be over. And rightly so. So we're very careful to be, as I said at the beginning of this, ourselves, to be us, to be as honest as we can, beyond sort of getting into personal detail that would be embarrassing to all concerned. I mean, people say I talk about our sex life. I don't. I really don't. I can't imagine anything worse than discussing the Madeley boudoir.
Yeah, I can't say I'm that interested, to be honest.
No, I'm exactly. The last thing you want to hear, isn't it?
It's a bit like Mum and Dad, really. I don't want to think about it.
I know. That's awful. I mean, when we started on this morning, students were a big fan base, and they still are, actually. And they used to say to us, when we met them in the street, you're just like my older brother and sister. We go, great. And then the years went past, and then they used to say, you're just like my mum and dad. We go, okay. And the other day, I was in our green room. We'd just done an interview with a girl of about 27. About 23. And she came in after the show. We have a little cocktail party every night after the show, and she came in, and she was about to leave, and she said, can I just say something to you, Richard? I said, sure. And she said, it's just that you really remind me of somebody. And I said, oh, really? Who's that then? And she said, my granddad.
There's no greater insult, is there?
I'm mortified.
Congratulations on being you. You are unique, and God bless you, and good luck with your new project on Watch TV. And thanks for writing this book. It's stimulating. It's one of those few reads, especially this season, A, written by the author, and B, that makes you think about your life and your relationship with your father and his relationship with his father. And I tell you what it taught me. I know nothing about my father's relationship with his father.
That's a place you need to go.
Richard Madeley, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you.